thing that I'll never forget was, you know, my mother in the 70s waving me off at an airport and, you know, encouraging me to go because she did not want her kids to stay and see what was happening here. Because the violence, the bigotry, the hatred, it was such a ghastly experience.
When I was a teenager, during the hunger strikes, there would have been experiences of riots on a daily basis, actually, and I would have been about 12, 13 years of age at the time, and would have got involved in petty rioting along with my peers and my friends because it was the dumb thing. It was what we did, you know.
In the early days of community work, there was only women to do it, because on the nationalist side, most of the men had been interned, and the nationalist women had to get themselves organised, had to get themselves educated into funding and how to run centres and things like that. On the Protestant side, we organised ourselves simply because it was a male-dominated scene at that stage, and there was nothing on the programme for women. Women united across the peace line because it was easier for women to cross the peace line. So therefore there was a great networking set up over the really bad days of the Troubles amongst women and amongst women's groups, and they've remained to this day.
There was a lot of sectarian killings. There was a lot of random sectarian assassinations and bombs. So it wasn't very safe a place to be. I remember my early years in the 70s in Belfast. The Ulster Workers' Council strike was on in 74. We'd no electricity, we'd no light, we had nothing to cook with, and we were curfewed. You were not even allowed out of your community, you weren't allowed out of your streets.
I live about 200 yards from the peace line, and the peace line's 23 feet high and runs for 11 miles. Now the problems on both sides of that brick wall were the same. If there was an incident happened on the Catholic side of the peace line, we crossed the peace line and supported them very visibly. We were seen to support them. We didn't hide the fact that we were visiting their homes. We didn't hide the fact that we were saying to them, hey, we're here for you. And on the same way, if anything happened, for instance, when the Shankill bomb happened here, and we had a dreadful Saturday afternoon when 9 innocent people were killed, again, the Catholic people supported us. And it's all about being visible and standing together. It's not about perhaps making a private phone call. It's about actually being seen out on the street, visibly supporting each other. Women who are willing to put their head above the parapet. They might get some, what we would say here, stick in their own area. They might get some criticism in their own area. But nonetheless, there are some very strong women who have taken real chances to bring about the good development we have in community development in Northern Ireland.
The reality is that the conflict here has been fought by men, argued by men, and women haven't been seen as the threat in the society, so they've been the ones that have been able to, you know, to cross those divisions, to go to the funerals of someone from the opposite community. It's been women who've visited husbands and sons in prison. It's been women who've coped, really, in terms of the conflict. But it's also been women who've been involved in the development of their own communities. They've wanted to try and change things at a local level, you know, very micro level. We monitor at marches, for example, and parades. We'll always have 2 or 3 individuals throughout various different places on the parade. What we do is we watch out for behaviour of both the bandsmen and the protesters. If there happen to be protesters, we watch out for behaviour of the RUC in terms of how they police a parade. We watch out for flashpoints. What we do is we go back to each of the individual organisations, whether it be the RUC, the residents group, the apprentice boys, whichever parading organisation it is, and we give our personal feedback to them and encourage them to perhaps say, you know, if you'd done certain things differently, this may not have happened, and this is how we've seen it.
There was a feeling that the future of Northern Ireland was going to be decided by men. And while 20 or 30 years ago this might have been acceptable, but in the 1990s, you know, people were saying, hold it a minute, women have a right to have a say in their future, particularly when it comes to peacemaking.
Have you ever in Northern Ireland seen a group of all shades of political colour sitting in one place at one time, all ready to talk to each other?
So in 6 weeks, we stood for election and came 9th party in Northern Ireland. It was a very, very interesting experience and continues to be, because The first meeting, I remember, it's April 1996. And, you know, there were women from everywhere gathered. And, you know, 70 or 80 of us all gathered in a hall in Belfast. And our one objective was to move this place forward instead of backward. And really, although there were difficulties in the debate and the conversation, we were all prepared to forget, or not to forget, but to leave our political baggage at the door and talk together and work together and plan together for a common approach, for a common future, for peace.
The press conference has been called this morning to launch our manifesto, the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition Manifesto.
You got a lot of personal abuse from male politicians as a woman politician here.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget that. I mean, it was humiliating. It was a way of undermining us, of taking away our confidence, taking away our dignity. The kind of things you want to do when you disempower a woman. But I had to remind myself this was more about them than it was about us. It was an unacceptable political culture that we were not going to collude with. And in challenging it and confronting it, we often made them more angry. But then we found a way of using both our good humour and staying fairly relaxed about it, whilst challenging it and pointing it out to the public.
First thing they've given me is a red card. David Beckham, here I come.
In the end, we succeeded in stopping it. You'll never stop it. They probably still feel that privately. But publicly, they realised that this was getting us more votes and was doing them more harm. Privately, I would say that quite a few of them still hold those attitudes towards women. The whinging women, whining women, stay in the kitchen, what are you doing in politics? This is not a space for you. Those were, you know, some of the comments. Greek chorus of women, that chant from women. And some of the worst ones then were scum and dogs.
We tried to create a microcosm of how we thought the political process and the peace process should work in Northern Ireland. For example, each time we sat down around a table to discuss an issue, a controversial issue, we'd put it in the centre of the table and we'd listen to each other's arguments on it. Now, what we were doing was we were listening to the loyalist, the nationalist, the Republican, the unionist, and the other argument each time, and listening to each other. So we were listening to the fears, the concerns, the hopes, the aspirations of each. The big problem in political parties here and undoubtedly in the rest of the world is that they only listen to themselves.
I can read, you know. Yes.
The only way to find out what problems are is to go meet the other person and ask.
I honestly feel that it's groups like us who've been dialoguing and talking long before the politicians, that we've created the ground for the politicians to be able to do their job. Now, the politicians probably won't agree with that, but I firmly believe that it's people like us who've been organising opportunities for dialogue and for individuals who never get the opportunity to sit down and discuss with each other, or who have a fear or hatred of one another, giving them those opportunities to discuss, to dialogue, to understand. We have created, I think, the framework for the peace process, in truth.
I was awarded a life peerage by the Queen in recognition of the work, and I now sit in the House of Lords, representing all the people of Northern Ireland in the House of Lords. As women, we have long moaned that we weren't being recognised, that we weren't in the positions of power, we weren't with the policy makers, and I thought as a woman I was being given a wonderful opportunity. It has been a year of experience, and hopefully taking up bread and butter issues for the people of Northern Ireland in the House of Lords.
Experiences are universal. And that's what's changed now, that women have moved on. They've fought their right to be there. They've gone out and competed, and now they need to lead. And I think that that's what we did when we were in the negotiations, and afterwards when we went on into the elections, is to be able to show that we were as capable of competing and governing and leading as the men had been, who were the normal established constitutional parties.